While she does that, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Kristen Rudd in the forums and everywhere else. I will definitely eat cheese fries with anybody. All you have to do is ask. I live in Cary. I was an ML for 6 years. I was 3 years ML in San Francisco and 3 years here before I stopped being an ML because I do have a very busy life. I got a private certification in classical teaching. And so I stopped doing Nano in order to focus on that. I currently homeschool my 2 high school age children, and I teach online classes and tutor students, and I'm in grad school, and I copy edit books, and I do some writing for some sites on the side. So everyone's trying to tell me I should not be doing Nano, which if you know me at all, you probably don't want to say that, because that's the best way to get me to do something, is to tell me I shouldn't do it or that I can't. So that's a little bit about me. I tend to write fantasy. I've written young adult, mainstream. I've written mainstream adult. I've played around with a lot of things. It's really fun. I think NaNoWriMo is a great way to help kickstart your writing habits, whether they're in fiction or not, just to kickstart them in general. So last week we did a workshop on plot. So was anyone in this workshop that was not in the workshop last week? Is anybody new? Just let me know in the chat box, because we'll cover a little bit of what we did there, but we won't hit it too much. But if there's new people, I can hit it a little more than I was planning to. So is everybody here there last week then? Okay, you weren't last week. You're new. Okay, oh, great. Oh, so the videos are up already. Oh, good. I'll have to get the link. Cool. Well, today we're going to talk about character development. So character development is really fun, but it can be one of those things that can derail your novel, because it can be one of those things that you can spend all your time doing and then never actually write your novel. So my goal here today is to give you some basic tools to kickstart you into developing some really strong characters without going overboard into all the detailed nitty-gritty. You don't need a 160-page character development worksheet to create a character. That might be fun, but it also takes away from the time that you really want to be spending, which is working on your actual novel. So I've got a little slideshow for us, and I'll pop back and forth between the slideshow and the rest of our time. So tell me, what are the problems that you have when you're creating characters? What are the challenges that you run into when you're writing your novel when it comes to character development? And you can unmute if it's faster, or you can type in the chat box. I'll give everybody a few minutes. Struggle to make their voices distinct. That's one issue, one challenge. Making sure they're unique. Yeah, again, developing distinct voices. Yeah, we have a similar vein here, don't we? Distinctive voices and believability. Yes. I don't know what their struggles are. I don't want to give them flaws. Well, I'm sorry. You must. Naming them things that make sense in my world. Having motivations for minor characters. Shh. Sorry, my dog. I'm gonna mute myself for a minute. All right, let's see where we are. Motivations for minor characters. I know what I want the characters to do to make the story happen, but is that always the choice they would actually make? Right. Are they being true to themselves? Have you created a character who's being true to the way they would do something and not what you would do? Okay, I'll let that keep running. So here's the primary thing. If you're going to be a novelist, you're going to have to both not be a part of polite society, and you're going to have to be. So it's mostly a conundrum, a bit of a paradox. What you need to do in order to write good characters is you have to become a student of life. You're going to have to start looking around and seeing different things. You're going to have to notice that that guy at the gym who you think would be wearing, you know, super duper athletic shoes is wearing boat shoes with no socks to lift. Like, what is happening? Like, why is this going on? You're going to start noticing little idiosyncrasies that make people who they are and what they are. And you need to pay attention to that. And these are the kinds of things that need to strike you. We had a guy come fix our dishwasher And bless his heart, it took him forever. He kept not being able to like get it. And he was just muttering and muttering the whole time. And it was getting later and later in the evening, and our kids came home. This was just this week, and we were cooking dinner. So, it's always a little nerve-wracking right now. Everyone's wearing masks. He's wearing a mask. We're wearing masks, in the house. And we went out on the back deck to eat dinner because it was really nice. So we left him in the house to continue working and muttering around the dishwasher, and we went outside so we could eat and not have anybody worry about, getting sick. But when he was finished, my husband offered him some food. He goes, can we give you some food? Would you like some dinner? He said, we can take it to go for you. We can wrap it up. And he said, no, it's okay. And then the most unexpected thing came out of his mouth. He said, I used to be a professional chef. And he said, for 16 years, I was a professional chef. So here's this, guy like fixing the dishwasher. You just don't think about these things because his character in my life is the dishwasher fixer, right? He's the appliance repairman. And he pulls up his sleeve and he reveals this tattoo on his arm that says, live, love, cook. Like this guy is like a former professional chef who left the business because he wanted to spend more time with his family. So he got, I don't know if he got certified, but he began working for an appliance repair company. And the irony is that, it's, 7:30 p.m. and he's still at someone else's house fixing a dishwasher. But you just don't know where people are going to come from. You don't know what they're going to be like. And they surprise you. So people who you think fit this one role in your life, turns out they're going to open their mouth one day and tell you something about who they are. And they're going to be someone else entirely because that's who they are, not who you necessarily want them to be. So these are the kinds of things in life you need to pay attention to. And the more you can pay attention to these, the more they will inform your writing and your characters. So everybody has a story. Everybody has something that you don't know that's going to surprise you about them. Everyone has something unexpected. And the more you observe this in life, the easier you'll be able to write your own characters. Pay attention, observe. When you're in a waiting room, since if we ever get to be in those anymore, look around, make up stories about the people. Notice what they're wearing, how they're wearing it. Why did they choose that piece of jewelry? Why is their hair the way that it is? What mannerisms do they have? How would you explain that to somebody? You just have to become a student of life. So that's really the best way to be a writer, is to pay attention to real life. So we're going to read a story. And we read The Gift of the Magi last week by O. Henry. And so I thought we should just continue the theme of reading stories by O. Henry. So I'm going to grab the link for the story here real quick and send it to you. And then we're going to read it together. And then we're going to talk about what we notice as far as characters. So here's the link. Feel free to pull it up. I'll have it up on screen, but if you want to pull it up so you can continue to refer to it during our talk, you can do that. So I'll give everyone a minute while I pull it up on screen. Did you guys know that O. Henry is from North Carolina? He's from North Carolina and he moved to Texas, and he embezzled some money. And when they came to get him, he took off and he ran away to South America or Central America. I can't remember. So this is the thing, right? You never know about somebody. Who would have guessed that O. Henry was an expat on the run? I didn't know that. I learned that yesterday. That's pretty cool. You have no idea. You have no idea about people. You have no idea which of your friends have actually robbed a bank. Because there are some that have, I promise you. You don't know. You don't know what people are like. If we can drag that into our characters, then we'll do a really good job as writers. Okay, you guys ready? The Cactus by O. Henry. The garments of his soul must have appeared sorry and threadbare. Vanity and conceit, these were the joints in his armor. And how free from either she had always been. But why? The most notable thing about time is that it is so purely relative. A large amount of reminiscence is, by common consent, conceded to the drowning man. And it is not past belief that one may review an entire courtship while removing one's gloves. That is what Trisdale was doing, standing by a table in his bachelor apartments. On the table stood a singular-looking green plant in a red earthen jar. The plant was one of the species of cacti and was provided with long, tentacular leaves that perpetually swayed with the slightest breeze, with a peculiar beckoning motion. Trisdale's friend, the brother of the bride, stood at a sideboard complaining at being allowed to drink alone. Both men were in evening dress. White favors like stars upon their coats shone through the gloom of the apartment. As he slowly unbuttoned his gloves, there passed through Trisdale's mind a swift, scarifying retrospect of the last few hours. It seemed that in his nostrils was still the scent of the flowers that had been banked in odorous masses about the church, and in his ears the low-pitched hum of 1,000 well-bred voices, the rustle of crisp garments, and most insistently recurring, the drawling words of the minister irrevocably binding her to another. We're going to make Mariah cry again. From this last hopeless point of view, he still strove, as if it had become a habit of his mind, to reach some conjecture as to why and how he had lost her. Shaken rudely by the uncompromising fact, he had suddenly found himself confronted by a thing he had never before faced. His own innermost, unmitigated, arid, unbedecked self. He saw all the garbs of pretense and egoism that he had worn now turned to rags of folly. He shuddered at the thought that to others before now, the garments of his soul must have appeared sorry and threadbare. Vanity and conceit, these were the joints in his armor, and how free from either she had always been. But why? As she had slowly moved up the aisle toward the altar, he had felt an unworthy, sullen exultation that had served to support him. He had told himself that her paleness was from thoughts of another than the man to whom she was about to give herself. But even that poor consolation had been wrenched from him. For when he saw that swift, limpid, upward look that she gave the man when he took her hand, he knew himself to be forgotten. Once that same look had been raised to him, and he had gauged its meaning. Indeed, his conceit had crumbled. Its last prop was gone. Why had it ended thus? There had been no quarrel between them. Nothing. For the 1,000th time, he remarshaled in his mind the events of those last few days before the tide had so suddenly turned. She had always insisted upon placing him upon a pedestal, and he had accepted her homage with royal grandeur. It had been a very sweet incense that she had burned before him, so modest, he told himself, so childlike and worshipful, and he once would have sworn, so sincere. She had invested him with an almost supernatural number of high attributes and excellencies and talents, and he had absorbed the oblation as a desert drinks the rain that can coax from it no promise of blossom or fruit. As Trisdale grimly wrenched apart the seam of his last glove, the crowning instance of his fatuous and tardily mourned egoism came vividly back to him. The scene was the night when he had asked her to come up on his pedestal with him and share his greatness. He could not now, for the pain of it, allow his mind to dwell upon the memory of her convincing beauty that night, the careless wave of her hair, the tenderness and virginal charm of her looks and words. But they had been enough, and they had brought him to speak. During their conversation, she had said, "And Captain Carruthers tells me that you speak the Spanish language like a native. Why have you hidden this accomplishment from me? Is there anything you do not know?" Now, Carruthers was an idiot. No doubt he, Trisdale, had been guilty. He sometimes did such things, of airing at the club some old canting Castilian proverb dug from the hotchpotch at the back of dictionaries. Carruthers, who was one of his incontinent admirers, was the very man to have magnified this exhibition of doubtful erudition. But alas, the incense of her admiration had been so sweet and flattering. He allowed the imputation to pass without denial. Without protest, he allowed her to twine about his brow this spurious bay of Spanish scholarship. He let it grace his conquering head, and among its soft convolutions, he did not feel the prick of the thorn that was to pierce him later. How glad, how shy, how tremulous she was, how she fluttered like a snared bird when he laid his mightiness at her feet. He could have sworn, and he could swear now, that unmistakable consent was in her eyes. But coyly, she would give him no direct answer. "I will send you my answer tomorrow," she said. And he, The indulgent, confident victor smilingly granted the delay. The next day he waited, impatient, in his rooms for the word. At noon, her groom came to the door and left the strange cactus in the red earthen jar. There was no note, no message, merely a tag upon the plant bearing a barbarous foreign or botanical name. He waited until night, but her answer did not come. His large pride and hurt vanity kept him from seeking her. 2 evenings later, they met at a dinner. Their greetings were conventional, but she looked at him breathless, wondering, eager. He was courteous, adamant, waiting her explanation. With womanly swiftness, she took her cue from his manner and turned to snow and ice. Thus, and wider from this on, they had drifted apart. Where was his fault? Who had been to blame? Humbled now, he sought the answer amid the ruins of his self-conceit. If the voice of the other man in the room, querulously intruding upon his thoughts, aroused him. I say, Trisdale, what the deuce is the matter with you? You look unhappy, as if you yourself had been married instead of having acted merely as an accomplice. Look at me, another accessory, come 2,000 miles on a garlicky, cockroachy banana steamer, all the way from South America, to connive at the sacrifice. Pleased to observe how lightly my guilt rests upon my shoulders. Only little sister I had, too, and now she's gone. Come now, take something to ease your conscience. I don't drink just now, thanks, said Trisdale. Your brandy, resumed the other, after coming over and joining him, is abominable. Run down to see me sometime at Puto Redonda and try some of our stuff that old Garcia smuggles in. It's worth the trip. Hallo, here's an old acquaintance. Wherever did you rake up this cactus, Trisdale? A present, said Trisdale, from a friend. Know the species? Very well. It's a tropical concern. See hundreds of them around Punta every day. Here's the name on this tag tied to it. Know any Spanish, Trisdale? No, said Trisdale, with the bitter wraith of a smile. Is it Spanish? Oh, yes. The natives imagine the leaves are reaching out and beckoning to you. They call it by this name, Ven tomarme. Name means in English, come and take me. All right. So, poor Trisdale. Should I leave this up on the screen so we can look at different parts, or shall I move back to the, yeah, okay. So tell me, who is our story about?
About Trisdale.
Trisdale. Who is Trisdale?
A man who did not get married.
A man who did not get married. This is true. Somebody else got married though, didn't they? Mm-hmm. Who got married?
The woman he loved.
The woman he loved. Loves.
Loves, still.
Still, yes? So what's the story here? What's happened? Where are we? Where do we open?
In his, notably, bachelor's apartments.
Bachelor's apartments. And it says down here, through the gloom of the apartment, right? So we've got our setting here pretty well spelled out for us. We don't ever leave this setting in the narrative of the story, but we do have a flashback, right? So the author, even in this short story that we were able to read very quickly, there's a lot going on. We do have a flashback to another couple of scenes. So yes, we're after the wedding of the woman that he apparently clearly still is very much in love with. Who else is with him?
The brother of the woman he is in love with.
The brother of the woman. So interestingly, the brother and the woman are never named in this story. We are never given their names. So we have 3 characters in this story. Yes? So it's very difficult to find a short story that has a large cast of characters doing a lot of things that you can read within 10 minutes. So we went with the O. Henry just because it's fun to do another O. Henry. So we've got 3 characters. We've got Trisdale, we've got the brother of the bride, and then we have the blooming bride, who is not actually present in our narrative. only in flashback. So tell me anything that you know about Trisdale. What is he like?
He is vain.
He is vain. And he is coming to sweet, sweet terms with that vanity right now, is he not?
Oh, yeah.
How do we know that he's vain?
Because he would rather make a terrible mistake than contradict praise that has been heaped upon him.
Ah, yes. But it's undeserved praise, is it not?
It is. It is
What
undeserved.
is the praise that has been heaped upon him that is undeserved? What has happened?
Someone has said that he speaks Spanish like a native.
Spanish like a native. And when his girlfriend, who, by the way, if you didn't catch it, he is proposing to her. Okay, if that's not clear, he is bringing her up on the pedestal with him, and she has asked him to give her a day to give him her answer. That's a lot of pronouns. So she's going to come back with her answer the next day, and he is convinced she's going to say yes. Right? Let's go down to it. How she fluttered like a snared bird when he laid his mightiness at her feet. That says a lot right there. He's laying his mightiness at her feet. This tells you how he feels about himself for sure. It makes me think of Ozymandias just a little bit.
Yeah.
Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretched far away. He could have sworn, and he could swear now, the unmistakable consent was in her eyes. So he thinks he's got her. She's saying yes. And she is, isn't she?
Yeah.
But he lets this idiot Carruthers, which he now is probably definitely feeling Carruthers is an idiot. My guess is to prevent him from calling himself quite such an idiot in this moment in time. Carruthers told his darling that he spoke Spanish like a native. What our Trisdale does not know at this point is that his darling clearly does, which we learn from the brother and Come Down With Me, like where they're from, right? She's clearly grown up speaking Spanish. And isn't she sweet? Why have you hidden this accomplishment from me? Is there anything you do not know? Oh, she loves this man. She loves this man. And this is how we know, right? He's told us that she's placed him on a pedestal. And all this right here, this is what he has told us about her. So this is what we know about her. And here, O. Henry shows us how much she does. Yes? Consent was in her eyes. Yes, he won't admit what he doesn't know because he's too vain and he's too proud. And he's egoistic, as he says more than one time. So we know a few things about him. We don't have any real physical description of him, other than the fact that he's wearing evening dress and he is very slowly ripping apart his gloves into little pieces, which is a metaphor for his love life. So we don't really have any physical description of him. And she has not been named, and we have very, very limited description of her. And you know what's really interesting about this? This is the entire extent of her physical description right here. She had convincing beauty, careless wave of her hair, the tenderness and virginal charm of her looks and words. We are given no other description. But what's so fascinating to me is that we don't need it. This is all we need. So we can each have a picture of her in our mind of what she might look like, right? We are given one other place right here. This line right here, limpid is such a great word. For when he saw that swift, limpid look upward that she gave the man when he took her hand, he knew himself to be forgotten. So this is really the only physical description we're given of her. So we know a little bit about her. He cares far more about who she is. The sweet incense, she's modest, she's childlike and worshipful, and he once would have sworn sincere. And he's questioning this now, isn't he? He shouldn't, but he is. And just the investment she had in him. He found a woman who absolutely adored him. There's actually one other place, the dinner. There it is. So she's given him this plant, which I love, come and take me, and he can't read it. And so we obviously know at the end what had happened in her, and he does not know this. This is not information that he has this whole time. He does not know what the plant has said. He's living in this like almost the opposite of wishful thinking. He's living in this lie. He's living in a lie. And he's acting upon that lie. He doesn't know what the truth is, and he's acting upon it. And his narrative in his own mind is not the truth. But it's the only truth that he has. So he gets this cactus, doesn't hear from her. So he's thinking, I haven't heard from her. This is a no. She doesn't want me. So he withdraws, right?
But like she sent her groom with this plant. Like there is a fundamental lack of perceptiveness or curiosity or something in him.
Of curiosity. That's very
He's
good.
got the dictionaries. Can't he look up what the words mean?
Right? But like he wants to think of himself the way that others portray him. And so he is not willing to admit even to himself when he doesn't know something. And so instead of saying, you know, this came from her groom, it probably came from her, it must mean something, he just puts it on a shelf and is like, well, she didn't call me.
Yeah, it's very tight. It's very well done. I know I'm looking at this going, he's so good. He's just so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've learned a hell of a lot about Trisdale from this action alone.
Like I have read 300-page novels that reveal less about characters than this 2-page.
I know, isn't it great?
It's amazing. But also I am so frustrated right now.
See, and that's the goal. Oh, Henry got a reaction from you. You're invested in this story. You're invested in this story and in this character, who, to be frank, is not very likable.
Not at all.
Okay? So when people tell you you have to like your characters, this is not true. You do not have to have likable characters. But we care about this man yet. We care about what's happened to him. We're so wrapped up in his head, we want to know what's going on as well. And then when it's revealed, we are kind of like, poof, like blown away, right?
Because you know, like if you have a brain in your head, you know the second this cactus appears from her, like that means something.
And when you know O. Henry, you know that he's going to give us a twist, right? Thing. Yeah, we know this cactus means something. Go ahead.
And just to be fair, I mean, I think he doesn't miss that it means something. He just misinterprets what he means. He interprets it, oh, it's a cactus. That's a prickly, you know, not pleasant sort of plant. And he thinks that's the meaning. He just isn't, because he doesn't have the awareness to know that the meaning is something, is the name of the plant and not the type of plant.
Right. Because he's so full of himself, he thinks he knows better, right? He doesn't see the value in the prickly cactus. It's not a dozen roses.
Right. So, I mean, it's not that he doesn't make an interpretation. He makes the false interpretation because of his character.
Right, exactly. Is that Phil? Okay. Hi, Phil.
Yes. Hey.
You know what this reminds me of, though? Is, remember last year when we read the Frog Prince, right? And we talked about the princess, right? The princess wanted her ball back, right? What did she need? She needed some help. She needed some saving. And it didn't look how she wanted it to look. And so she ignored it and didn't see the value in it. This is a common theme, apparently. So let's see. He does admit his own flaws, which helps us to like him. Yes. Now, he's admitting them now. Took him long enough. in retrospect at least, but he only admits them when he is compelled to. Yeah, he's been forced now to take a really hard look at himself. And that's relatable as heck. Oh yeah. Yeah, this is the truth about humanity, is it not? When do we look at our flaws?
When they have caused us pain.
Yeah, when other people make us.
Or others, right? So there's something very beautiful and human and common in this short little story. We don't look at our flaws. I mean, when it's 3 a.m., there's nothing else to look at. But generally, when we walk through life, we don't look at our flaws unless we have to, we've been forced to, or we have hurt someone, or we have been somehow compelled to. So this is something that's very true. When we talk about you just have to tell the truth, right? Your stories have to tell the truth. This is the truth telling that we're doing. Another interesting little thing I found is we're in his apartments. You guys caught that. And yes, Trisdale's friend, the brother of the bride, stood at a sideboard complaining at being allowed to drink alone. So Trisdale is not drinking, but the brother is. So they've gone through the wedding, having a celebratory, at least what the brother thinks is a celebratory drink. But Trisdale won't drink, which I find fascinating. You know why? Anyone want to take a guess as to why this fascinates me so much?
Because it's the opposite of what people would expect. I mean, if you're feeling depressed or whatnot, you may be compelled to drink normally, but he's doing the opposite.
He's doing the exact opposite of what we expect.
Like there's this trope of like, you're feeling sorry for yourself, you go drink alone.
That's because it's true. But he's not drinking, which is interesting. And the way he says this is just brilliant. I don't drink just now, thanks. Right? And this is great because this is used as a transition. I love this. Take something to ease your conscience. He doesn't want to ease his conscience, right? We drink because we're happy, or we drink because we're sad. He's not happy, so he can't drink because he's happy. And he can't use it to ease his sadness. He wants to feel it. He wants to feel every single last emotion he's feeling. So he's not going to drink just now.
Which like,
I find,
good on him.
I know, I find this really, really interesting.
Like
I really do.
To have realized that his own folly caused pain to the woman he loved and to himself, and for him to not seek oblivion and comfort and to actually examine what caused this. Like,
yeah, this is his penance. So he's aired.
And it's also an opportunity for growth, which a lot of people would, studiously avoid.
Yes. But it's a great transition because it enables the brother to then change gears on us and get us to the next part of the story. Your brandy is abominable. It's a good thing you're not drinking because your stuff sucks. And he says, come down and see me, and it gets us into the next part of our story. So this little character tidbit also moves our story along. So we have 3 characters. Can we tell them apart very easily? Oh yeah, there's some nods.
We have 4 characters.
4.
We can't forget
Carruthers. The guy that lied
Carruthers.
about his Spanish.
Right, yes. Who's never really even present in any of the scenes, but he's there.
He's there in 2 lines and we know so much about him.
And the groom. The one thing I'm not clear on, and it could just be the language, is when it says her groom came to bring him the cactus. I'm not quite sure if that's just like a serving person or if this is like her groom. Like, I'm not sure. I'm not real clear on that.
Sounds like servant.
Yeah, it sounds like a service. Could be the same. I don't think so though, because I think he would have drawn that out. All right. So even in a very tight space, very short story, we're able to get a lot about our characters. So there's a few things when you're writing that you can do. So how to help? How do we help with character development? Let me switch gears. So we've asked a few questions about the story. We've made some observations. So I'm going to give you 5 questions to ask of every character in your story. You can go online and you can look up character development worksheets or character development, charts, and there are you can get lost. I mean, you can suck your time away by looking at this. There are so many things you can do with character. We could spend sessions upon sessions. We could do a whole class, semester-long class on just how to build characters. Any resource you look at has just tons of great advice, great things to ask. So I'm not here to be exhaustive. I'm here to give you a little bit to get you started. Go find other resources if you'd like. Normally I have a whole bunch of lists of things to ask, and they're just really good. But I'm gonna give you 5 questions to ask. So primarily, we want to know what our characters look like. And interestingly, we're not told about Tisdale. We can take some guesses though, at least as far as countenance. This is a man who currently is not doing so hot, but used to think very, very highly of himself. So as far as behavior and mannerisms, there's some things going on in this story that we already know. He's fiddling with his gloves. We know how he's dressed. We're not given super sharp, detailed descriptions of it. That is one of my personal biggest pet peeves, is when someone describes their character's clothing constantly. I'm like, I don't care. I don't need the detail. Just get me to who they are. What is how they dress and what they wear? Tell me about who they are. And that doesn't matter what genre you're writing in, right? If you're writing fantasy, who is it had mermaids and assassins? Like, how people dress is a reflection of who they are. It's the outward reflection of the inward self for the most part. And we can play with that, right? I used to have really bright red hair, and I don't anymore. I confused Ashley last night. She couldn't find me at the restaurant because she forgot that my hair is brown. How people look tells us a little bit about them. It gives us clues. This is what I talk about when you're observing people in real life. Like, what does that tell you about that person, right? We know what the woman looks like very, very briefly. Mostly we see her in almost this angelic view that he sees her in, and that's how we know her. That then shifts from being this warm, open person to being, he says, snow and ice. He kind of deserved it. And it's interesting, once again, like the story last week, this is a story about miscommunication. If they communicated, we wouldn't have had the problem. But if they'd communicated, we wouldn't be reading a short story either. There would be no story to tell. Like, you have to have conflict. So you want to know what your character looks like, and you at least want to have your own good guess of what that is. So that's something that you need to know. And you can get super nitty-gritty and detailed about all of this, but there's no need to. But you need to have a basic sense of what they all look like. And then here's what's really interesting. Everybody has an internal narrative. And that shows up in 2 different ways. It shows up what they express to others and what they think. So when Carruthers tells this woman that Tisdale speaks Spanish like a native, Tisdale knows he does not. He knows this. That's not what he says, is it? So those 2 things are in contradiction with each other. And that tells us a lot about Tisdale. So what someone says about themselves and what they think about themselves may or may not be the same thing. So that's something very important to keep in mind. What is my internal dialogue about who I am as a person? I know who I am. I know what I am not, right? This is why we have friends, because we have friends to speak into our lives to tell us who we really are. So when we get down on ourselves, they can go, no, you're beautiful. I love you. This is who you really are, right? That's what we need people for, which brings us to the next question. There's a difference between what other people think about you and what they tell you to your face. The people who matter will have both of those things line up, right? The people who don't may look at us and say they like us and then turn around and stab us in the back. We see this quite clearly in several stories. Any story where you've got, some kind of, any movie of, teenage life in America is going to have, the mean girl who is sweet to someone's face and then does the horrible things behind her back, right? This is just, it's a kind of a motif. It's definitely a trope. But what do other people say about your character? And this isn't just your protagonist. This goes for everybody. All of these things go for everybody. What's their internal narrative? What do they actually say out loud? And then what do others say and think about them too? Do those line up? And what does that tell us about each character in consideration? So how do they interact with their environment? Well, Tisdale's tearing up his gloves. He's not drinking. We know what his environment is like. And interestingly, we know how he felt about the wedding. Did you guys catch that? He did not like being there. He talked about the smell, the smell of the flowers and the hum of the 1,000 well-bred people and the drawl of the minister. He's not happy about being there. Very different way to be describing that environment than the bride might be. So his interaction with that moment was very different in the way she was interacting. And if we could write this story from her perspective, we might have a very different narrative. Yes? And then the easiest one, once you have all of these things, what sets them apart? We have 2 men in evening wear in this apartment. How do we tell them apart? What distinguishes them?
One of them is really miserable.
One of them
And
is drinking.
And one of them is drinking, right? And their dialogue really helps us here, doesn't it? The brother's dialogue is peppy, right? It's unconcerned. It's oblivious a bit to Trisdale. He says, what the deuce is wrong with you? Like, he knows something's going on, but he's not interested in really dwelling on it at the moment. Like, he's not really asking. And Trisdale is not going to tell him anyway. He won't even admit his closeness to the sister. We're really unclear what his relationship to the brother is. They're clearly, friends of some way. Maybe, maybe not. But the brother is clearly unaware that he had proposed to the bride at one point. And which means what we also learned is that the bride, she never told her brother. She kept it to herself, right? He says the cactus was from a friend, but he never says who. He doesn't say, oh, your sister so-and-so gave it to me however many years ago, right? Which is interesting because in that way, he and the bride are similar. They're both keeping something to themselves that they're not telling anyone else. He kept the cactus. Yep, he sure did. Would you keep the cactus?
I mean, he's still in love with her. Of course he keeps the cactus.
Ah. He's also refusing to drink, right? I like cactuses, so yes. Yeah, I'd probably keep the cactus.
It's part of his penance, like you mentioned earlier.
Right.
He's not drinking because he has to feel these feels because it's penance. Like he has
right, he has to keep the cactus to remind him of his folly.
Well, and until the vows were said, he was clinging to this hope that she was going to
This is true. This is true.
See the error of her ways.
What do you think is going to happen with the cactus now?
I have a feeling the cactus is going to be hurled out of a window sometime soon.
At great speed. With great velocity.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting, right? So one of the things he's interacting with in his environment is this cactus. The thing with accidentally forgetting to care for cacti is they don't really care.
They really don't.
Yeah, it's very hard to kill a true cactus.
Mm-hmm.
It's like forgetting to care for your air plant. It's just not going to work out.
Oh yeah, I got one of those. It died a long time ago. It looks fine.
Like they don't look any different.
Yeah, so he's interacting with this plant. That's a really good point. I actually hadn't thought about that he's left this cactus in his apartment. And it's a part of his everyday environment.
Maybe not years and years, but it's been a minute. She's had time to meet, date, get engaged to, plan a wedding with, and get married to some other dude.
It may not have been that long.
And it's a cactus.
It may not have been that long, but, presumably it was at least a month.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say
One
more
could
like 6, but yeah, she's gotten married.
Yeah.
Okay. So these are the questions we talked about last week when we talked about character. So we hit them briefly. So I hope that's a little bit more full treatment. We don't know how much time has passed. It could have been years. I hope not, because that's a really long time to pine for a girl. Like, I think he probably needs a therapist if that's the case.
I mean, he
probably
probably
needs therapists.
He probably needs a therapist.
Don't most humans need therapists?
Oh, yeah. But
Every human. Every
at
human
this
does.
stage, you know, O. Henry wrote at his contemporary time period, for the most part. So turn of, you know, the 20th century. And he does know a little bit about loss. So here's the thing. O. Henry's wife passed away of tuberculosis. He was actually, her mother actually, her family didn't want her to get married to him. They tried to, there's a verb and I can't grab it. They were disinclined for her to marry him because of her illness. And they got married and had a baby who then passed away. And then they had another baby. And then she couldn't come and join him in his exile because she was not well enough. And she ended up dying. So if there's something that O. Henry understands, it's grief and loss. He did get remarried to his childhood sweetheart. But he knows a little bit about loss. And I think that's one of the reasons he's able to write this so convincingly. So we bring what we know in our lives with us when we write. Don't leave it at the door, right? Okay, so I have 3 rules for creating memorable characters. And this is probably the most important one. So I'm going to give you my rules. So here's the thing. We are the centers of our own universes. It doesn't matter if you're the protagonist, if you're the villain, or if you're some minor character who spilled something on somebody else's shoes. Every single person cares about themselves more than they care about anything else. And if you can keep that in mind when you're writing your characters, then you will not create flat one-dimensional characters. It's virtually impossible. You might on a first draft, and that's okay. So if you feel like, oh, well, she said, I'm not going to do this, and then you do, don't worry about it. It's nano. Don't worry about it. But every character is their own hero. Every character cares about what happens to themselves more than anything else. Even when we're altruistic, we're still caring about ourselves. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. We're the only ones in our own brains, right? But that's the number 1 rule. And if you can keep that in the forefront of your mind, every time you're writing someone, remember that that's what they think. And that will help. And then usually, I always say usually because it is a caveat, your character should grow or change over the course of your story. Trisdale does right at the end. In that, oh no, I have made a huge mistake, right? Which we know is coming. We don't even get to see it, but we know it's coming. But we do see change in him. He goes from this vain, pompous man who, frankly, I think the chick dodged a bullet. Really. I think she really did. Maybe if she'd met him now, she might not. I think he's a better man than he was at the beginning. So which interestingly in this story is the beginning of our narrative is not the beginning of our story, which is great because O. Henry drops us right into the middle of it. We have to go back to understand where we are. But the beginning of the story, he is this pompous man who lets people talk him up and he kind of likes it. And he loves the attention he gets from her, loves it. He thrives on it.
Praise.
Do what?
Don't we all love praise and attention?
Don't we all love praise and attention? I feel bad for him. He had a woman in his life who did that. He got lots of praise and attention, and he didn't deserve it. Which tells us a little bit about her. I hope she's grown. So, and maybe she clearly has. So he's definitely grown, hasn't he? He's gone from this pompous guy to someone who's at least having a little bit more self-reflection. Probably not done on his path yet, but he's changed. She has too. She was this innocent, virginal, all these words that make her sound very young, right? Not just in age, but in mental and emotional maturity. And now she's standing at the altar, looking up at this man with love and wonder in her eyes. And not uninformed love and wonder. She's been through a heartache. Come and take me? Good Lord, it's beautiful. And then she shows up at dinner and he doesn't know what to say, right? She's experienced heartbreak. She's learned from this clearly. The brother doesn't really change much, but that's not his role. That's not the role he's there to play. And so that's why I have this caveat. Usually they should change or grow. And there are exceptions. So fairy tales are very black and white. There's good people and there's bad people, and never the twain shall meet. They're not meant to be ambiguous. Okay, Voldemort does not grow or change because he's really a fairy tale antagonist. That's his role. So this doesn't mean that everybody has to, but everyone, think about the character arc of every character that you have. And this is super important. This is why I'm not a huge fan of filling out a bunch of worksheets before you do Nano. It's a good idea to get a sense of your characters. When I started Nano, like my first few years, I would buy like moleskin notebooks, and I would put like a page for every character, and I would put everything that I knew about that character in these notebooks, and have these like very detailed like character Bibles for all my novels. And it was fun, sure, but then something would change, or I would change my mind, or I wouldn't know. I kept trying to think about all the things I had to know about every character so I could keep them straight. And it can be hard to keep your characters straight. There's some that have multiple names because I couldn't remember what I called them. So it is important to keep your characters straight. But you're not going to get to know them by filling out a character sheet. You're just not. You're going to get to know them. Yes, take notes as you write, not before. As you write your character, you're going to get to know them. So as we read Trisdale, we got to know him. But that's the best way you're going to get to know them. You're going to get to know them through their dialogue, through what they say, through what they don't say, depending on what perspective you're writing in. You're going to get to know what's in their head. You're going to get to know how their mannerisms, their behaviors, through the description that you write, through the interactions they have with other people, through what they do that's going to surprise you, because they're going to do things that you had no idea was coming. They're going to shock you. They're going to feel very real. And they're going to do things that you don't want them to do because that's where the story is going to take them. And so you're going to get to know them. You're going to be worried at the beginning, I don't know them, I don't know what to do. And that's okay, because the more you write, the more you'll get to know them. A few years ago, geez, it's got to be 7 or 8 years now, I wanted to write a parody of a Christmas romance novel for NaNoWriMo. So I sat down to write, like, poking fun at the genre, right? And then as I wrote throughout the month, I fell absolutely in love with my main character. I just adored her. And I ended up writing a really earnest novel. So I have written the bulk, I haven't finished it, but I've written the bulk of a Christmas romance. Because as I wrote these characters, and this woman who broke my heart, she just broke my heart. I just really fell in love with her, and I got to know her. And it wasn't so much about me making fun of this genre, which I thought it would be just a lark to do for Nano, right? Oh, let's do this for fun. And I just really came to care about her. Because of that, there's a lot of characters I didn't really get to know. So I kind of shot myself in the foot, but I got to know her really well. And I got to know other people in the story really well as I wrote them. One person I thought that I really wasn't going to like ended up being one of my favorite characters. Like, she was supposed to be a foil for my main character, a former love interest of a character. And she was supposed to be like her, one of her antagonists, and they ended up becoming friends, and I didn't see it coming. So I got to know them as I had them interact with each other, had them play with their personalities. That's how you'll get to know them. You have to sit down and do the work.
I'm sorry, are you telling me this writer's workshop, I have to then go home and actually like write my book?
It's shocking, just absolutely shocking.
I want my money back. I would like a refund.
I will give you a full refund. Don't worry.
Thank you.
You already have it, in fact.
Yeah,
Okay.
people for these?
Anybody have any questions or comments at this point? Anything that I've said that's like making you question yourself, or something else, or some character you've read strike you with anything that I've said? Is there anyone that you're thinking of, perhaps? How does that work with someone who plans everything if the characters can change the way the story goes? You mean work with someone who plans everything ahead? Like, you plan it out ahead and then the characters change the way the story. Yeah, well, frankly, your characters are in charge now. So I'm sorry, but
I may be able to speak to that a little bit because
Yeah, go for it.
I thoroughly outline all my novels beforehand. But it is true that as I'm writing the characters and get to know them better, they will be in situations. I know that situation is coming because it's in my outline, but the characters do end up interacting or making decisions that I didn't intend on. And so I do allow myself a little bit of room. It's not going to change the overall plot that much, but it might take me somewhere new. And then I have to figure out, either now that this is going somewhere that I didn't intend, do I find a way to kind of bring that, find a new way to get to where I was going, or do I need to change where it was that I was going? And usually, because my brain is working in the background, the whole time on this, it finds that connectivity, and I can, and it just becomes a new kind of exciting way to get to where I was going. And so it usually doesn't end up being a problem, even though it might initially seem like it. But I do think you have to allow for the fact that if you've gotten to know your character to the point where that character really is somebody different than you intended them to be, then that may be what your story is. That may be the better story, and you should honor that.
Yeah, that's the story you have now. Phil, for those of you who don't know, Phil writes epic fantasy and is a very, very detailed planner. And it's kind of amazing. Just the level of what he knows about his stories before he goes into it is just fascinating, and I love it. I'm not feeling guilty anymore about my antagonist not growing. Just make sure that your antagonist knows that they are their own hero, right? It's like having a toddler or coworkers. You can make plans, but sometimes your plans don't end up being perfect. You adapt, right? And you don't have to deal with people. It could be anything. I DM for a D&D campaign, and when I need a new character, I tried to come up with one thing that makes them interesting, as guy with eye patch or little girl who never stops crying. And I find that the process of telling the story creates the rest of what I need to have them play a role. The rest of what I need to have them play a role. The rest of the details are filled in by the audience. Like how we are given so few details about the bride, but we know so much about her because of it. You're welcome, Brittany. And especially as a planner, let go of any guilt that might be associated with having to change those plans. Yeah, NaNoWriMo is not the time for guilt. NaNoWriMo is the time to put words down on the page. If you sit there and you process all these other things, you're going to stymie yourself, and you're not going to get words down on the page. And that's the goal. Which is one reason I'm trying not to be too detailed in giving you too many things, because I don't want you to get bogged down in that. Have a general idea and then go for it. Giving yourself structure is good, but punishing yourself for not adhering to it isn't good. Yeah, that's for later. We don't have our inner editors in November. Okay. I promised you, whoops, this is so sensitive. Trying to change slides is incredibly sensitive. I promised you one character you never saw coming, but you probably saw it coming. Anyone want to guess what this character is? The cactus. Okay, everybody needs to put a cactus in their novels this November. Okay, that is my challenge to you.
Okay,
I don't care
as
if
an
you're
ML make this
set
an
in a
official
world
challenge.
where there are no cacti. You do now. Your world includes cacti. So put a cactus in your novel, but no, that's not the one character you never saw coming. Although I like it, we should definitely go for it. Time. Interesting. Any other guesses? ML team endorsed the challenge to put a cactus in your novel. Oh yeah, you guys earn stickers. No more guesses? Nobody wants to be wrong. Come on, everybody guess. You have to be wrong. It's NaNoWriMo. Harry Potter. The Spanish Inquisition. Yourself. How much of your own self goes into the book? The groom. Of course, now that I want to advance my slide, it won't. Hubris. Your setting. Setting does so much to character, right? How many stories in mythology does the weather influence the action of the story? Everything that happens has a corresponding element in nature. Yeah, most of them, pretty much all of them. Probably because Zeus is the god of thunder and lightning, right? Poseidon is the god of the sea. The reason Odysseus is having trouble is because Poseidon has stirred up the seas. Setting matters. So I think of it like the secret character. It's going to inform everything that your each character does. It's its own character, and think of it as a living sentient thing along with your characters. So time, you were very close. Yeah, time is a part of our setting. I do like Mariah's answer, yourself. How much of your own self you never saw coming? Because now what? Great, we've gotten all this stuff. Now what? Well, that's what we're going to talk about next. So I have this great book. It's rather long and dense. It's designed for a college course by Janet Burrows. I actually have two books by Janet Burrows. One is writing fiction. The other is imaginative writing, which deals with all kinds of writing, not just fiction, but helps inform all those different types. Oh, nice. I think I have the second edition. It's rather old. So we want to be writers. We want to be successful. We want to tell successful stories with interesting people that people care about, or at least are invested in, even if they don't care about them and wants to read. Every character is going to be based on somebody that you know, probably. They're always going to be a mix of real life and what's in your head. So we have to have three things. They have to be interesting. They have to be believable. We said last week, you have to tell the truth. And your dialogue has to tell the truth. And we have to care about what happens to them. Notice what's missing from this quote. There's nothing in here about needing to like your characters. Okay? You don't need to like your characters. Not required. Don't believe me, go read Gone Girl and tell me you like those characters. You don't have to like them. And here's what Stephen King says, and Anne Lamott says, which gets to what Mariah was hitting on. Every character has a little bit of you in it. Every single one. Love them or hate them, but they carry a piece of you. And it's always fun, you know, when you're writing and you tell people you're writing fiction, they're like, oh, is this story about you? And you're like, well, no, it's not me, you know. I work hard to make sure that I'm not my main character. If I'm like anybody in any of my stories, it's probably a side or supporting character. But there is an element that these are creatures of your own imagination who then somehow become sentient in your mind, which is one of the joys of writing fiction, honestly. It's a really beautiful thing when it happens. But there is a part of you in all of your characters because they are a figment of who you are. They are a part of who you are. And you're going to have to throw some trouble at them. You have to get them up a tree. You have to throw rocks at them. I'm sorry. I know you love them, but you're going to have to make their lives miserable. That's the goal here. Okay? You have to be horrible. How brokenhearted are we at the end of The Cactus when we realize what Trisdale is realizing in this moment? How brokenhearted are we for him? How much do we care? We threw a lot of rocks at him and we just threw a huge one right at the end. We think we're coming to like a resolution. No. We're throwing more things at him. Stuff has to happen.
It's definitely a resolution in that the thing that he hoped is that chapter of his life is closed.
Yes, and let's be honest. If we were going to map this out, what's the question driving the story? That's what he wants to know. Will Trisdale ever find out what happened? That's what he wants. He wants to know what happened. Is it not?
Mm-hmm.
That's the driving this entire story. He finds out. There is no denouement. There is no conclusion. It ends with the climax right there. Boom.
You messed
done.
up. Now what are you gonna do?
Oh, he knows now.
That was a metaphor that I used when I was teaching my creative writing 101 students in college. Was your story like that plot arc looks very much like a diving board. So you have to walk them up the stairs, and they have to stand at the end of that diving board. But where you end it can be anywhere from when they come up for air after hitting the water to that split second before they decide to jump.
Oh yeah.
And so this one, like, he has jumped and we see that it has been a bad jump.
Yeah, look before you leap, and
This is not going to be a graceful landing. But O. Henry doesn't need to write the landing because we.
How effective would this be if he did? That's the thing. He ends it at just the right moment. We could have gone on. I mean, we can go and continue to write the story. It might be a fun exercise, actually, to practice for November. Write the cactus from the bride's perspective. Turn it around. Write that whole scene where she sends the cactus and through goes to dinner with him. Write that. And here's the thing. What we know about her is what we know about her through his perspective of her. Because this is his story. So if you were to rewrite this, which might be a really fun exercise, I might go do it, and write it from her perspective, she might not be as naive or virginal or innocent or sweet and serene as he thinks of her, because he's also reminiscing about her. So he's got a big old pair of rose-colored glasses on his face, does he not? She might be a little bit, more nuanced than he gives her credit for.
She could easily have had her suspicions about, is he the person he claims to be? And that cactus could have been a test.
It could have been. I mean, you could try. That's the thing. You could write it that way. You could write it another way.
It could have been very earnest. We don't know.
I think so. That's because I have secret little romantic heart that I sometimes let out. Yeah, she's pretty amazing. She accepted a proposal via cactus. Very good point. Like, I just want to be friends with her. Yeah, and then we could try to write at the end of this, right beyond it. What happens now? Does he then pour himself a drink at this point? Does he tell the brother? I mean, like who is he? Probably not. I bet he's way too embarrassed, and he doesn't seem like a person who owns up to much shame. So there's lots you can do. So that's it. That's my workshop. There's your 5 questions, the 3 things you need to know, and the 1 character that you did not see coming. Although I really do like that you is the character. But 5, 3, and 1 is better than 5, 3, and 2, unless we then have a 1, because then that's Fibonacci and backwards. Anyway, feel free to Google online any character worksheets and things, but don't take yourself too seriously. If anyone has any questions, we've got time. We can take more questions, but that's all the presentation that I have. So thank you very much for coming and for interacting. And thanks to the MLs for having me.
We love having you. You're the best.
I love doing it. It's fun.
I have a question.
Yes.
I still don't know how to make my characters have flaws. Like, what do I do? How do I make them less than perfect? Because they're amazing characters. But like, I don't want them to be annoying, or I don't know. I could give them my flaws. I know about those.
Honestly, this is going to sound, I don't hope this doesn't sound cheesy, but there's a couple different personality types, tests, systems that you can use. So there's the Myers-Briggs personality system, right? And then there's the Enneagram system. And every personality has strengths and weaknesses. And sometimes they can be the same thing. And different people interact differently with those personalities. And so if you're looking for flaws, you can take some of those things. What do you think, what kind of personality does your character have? And then how could some of what they do be a flaw or a weakness? Sometimes our flaws are kind of the opposite of our strengths, not used well. So if our strength is a virtue, then the flaw would be the corresponding vice. Okay. So if you have strengths that your characters have, then you can take the flip side of that and make it a vice and give them a flaw.
Yeah.
So
I've been obsessively rewatching the Colin Firth Pride and Prejudice because that's the person that I am. And I love the conversation that Darcy and Elizabeth have about Darcy's flaws and how, you know, he doesn't see his pride as a flaw, because honestly, strengths can also be weaknesses. So we know that he is strong-willed, and that makes him unforgiving. We know that he is principled, and that makes him unsympathetic to people who are not. We know that he is privileged, and that can make him blind to some things about the situations of others. And so a lot of time you can think about, okay, this good thing, if taken to an extreme, what bad consequences might it have?
Right. And it can be simple. It doesn't have to be super deep. Like if you have trouble giving your characters flaws, start with something simple. So like personally, I have an enormous amount of bandwidth for lots of time and projects. Super big strength. Can also be a huge flaw. I can overcommit. I can run myself down. I can easily get into just overwhelm, right? So I have to be careful with my boundaries. And when I'm not, then I get overwhelmed. So it can be something that's even like, there's not a lot of stakes in that, which might be easier. Maybe they have a bad habit of, you know, cussing at the wrong time. You know, that's one of my flaws too. Or being, you know, inappropriate in serious moments. You know, it doesn't have to be super serious.
Well,
Does that help, Sadie?
the only thing I've got for her so far is that she's, you know, very compassionate, and so she's always adopting animals, and she's in the middle of like tracking down a serial killer, but there are kittens that need rescuing.
Okay, so if she's very compassionate, she's a helper, then she's going to overextend herself, right? She's going to help, but she's not going to take care of her own needs.
And it sounds like prioritization
She sounds like
might
a
be a
two, that's all I'm
problem.
saying.
Yeah, I think maybe a better way to
I don't know
about,
any twos in this room. None.
instead of thinking about its strengths and flaws, just think about the things that you do know about the character and the situation and the ways in which those traits could get them in trouble, because ultimately you just want conflict. So like with the compassion, you know, maybe there is something that she really needs to do, it needs to get done, but she gets sidetracked because she goes to take care of somebody else instead of taking care of herself, something like that. You don't have to label it as a strength or a weakness, but it's just something that causes, you know, that brings conflict into the story.
Right, that's a good point. Thank you.
Thanks.
Brittany, you had a question about if you're going to use a character worksheet, do you recommend any specific ones? Yes, I do, as a matter of fact. I made one. Here you go. This is just a simple character development chart. It's got the 5 questions, and it's got space for up to 3 characters. So this is idea for this is that you quickly plot down a little bit about each one. We filled these out in past workshops, and I'm going to make this link available to you. And like I did last time, I made all the stuff or sources available. So I'll make the slides available to you, and I'll make this worksheet available to you. So this one's there for you. You don't have to go search. You can spend your time actually planning your novel and doing all the things you need to do in October to get them out of the way so you can spend November planning. But it's got all 5 areas on it. Mariah recommends the D&D 5th edition character sheet as a starting point. Asks you how wise, charismatic, intelligent, strong, dexterous, and robust your character is. Except if you haven't written your story yet, you might not know. It also asks about bonds, their priorities, and their fatal flaw. Yeah, I've seen some where they say, you know, what would your character never do? Like what's their code? What's something they would never do? And interestingly, as we all know in real life, we might do what we say we would never do, right? So there's plenty out there, but I will make that one available to you. It's just super simple based on the 5 questions to ask. It's a good question.
Talking about flaws, like sometimes what the reader will see as a flaw, what other characters will see as a flaw might be something that the character perceives as a strength.
Yeah, and that's how, this is where interacting with each other, right? Like personalities. Like some people I know, like some personality types just rub me the wrong way. They just do. It doesn't mean they're flaws. It just means in my relationship with that kind of person, there's always going to be conflict because of my personality. So that's not necessarily a flaw per se. And then there's personality types that am drawn to and get along with really, really well. And that's you know, it's how you find your people, right? So, and again, it's not necessarily flaw, but it's just how people interact with each other. Any more questions?
And if you have questions beyond character, we can open this to a broader discussion.
We can.
You know, Nano in general, if you have lingering plot questions from last week.
Yeah, happy to do that too.
Writing advice in general, it doesn't have to be necessarily specific to plot or character.
And we can all discuss. So like if y'all, like, you know, some people have been chiming in with answers, but you know, feel free to chime in if you have an answer to somebody else's question.
We need like background music.
We do.
I could totally hook us up with something.
But you don't like my rendition of the Jeopardy theme / I'm a little teapot?
Well, this has been great fun.
You are always great fun, my love.
This is true.
It's fact.
All of you are great fun. I love nano people. You, as Kristen said, that's how you find your people. Nano people are my people.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Kristen specifically is my people. Kristen is a good people.
So
I am having a terrible character trouble. So I discovered yesterday that I need to add a new character to the story that I am working on. So this book that I've been working on for a very, very, very long time, I have been stuck. A significant portion of the story is an actual physical, like, hero's journey. And it is a princess and her cousin who has been the head of her father's royal guard, who she initially believes is rescuing her from an attempted coup, an attempted murder. Turns out he is kidnapping her because he's the one trying to take over her throne. But I can't, just the two of them traveling is not enough of a dynamic. I really, really need someone to go with them. And I cannot figure out who on earth that person could possibly be.
Does she have a chambermaid?
Yes, she does.
Yeah, like that was my first thought too, actually. If you're kidnapping royally, the maid goes with them.
Yeah, especially because he's it's kind of a covert kidnapping, so what has happened is she is on her way to visit the country whose prince she has been unwillingly betrothed to. And she is awoken in the night by her cousin who says, all of your guards are dead, we need to run. So I think the chambermaid traveling with her, she would say, come, let's go, let's get out of here. So that seems very reasonable.
Or maybe they stumble across somebody on the way.
That was my other thing. I was like,
right, like you can't leave this person alive, but we can't kill him.
Mm-hmm.
That's not
yeah. What does the person going with them need to do? So part of the reason that I need another person is because her countrymen need to know that she isn't dead, so that her throne can't be given away before she gets back. So that someone needs to get the information back to the capital that she is in fact alive. And she needs someone to help her figure out that her cousin is wackadoodle and also really evil. And that he's only keeping her alive as long as she's useful to him. So she needs a foil between her and her cousin, who is terrible. So chambermaid is a good possibility.
I have to write it and figure it out.
Hey, dang it! That again?
I know. It's just, guys. I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to actually write your novels.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no way around it. You're gonna have
to
sit
go
down.
on mute so I can cuss.
You have to sit down, Put your butt in the chair and put your fingers on the
Write the
keyboard
words.
or on
Yeah.
the pen and get the
And
words
in-
down.
In chat, Dawn is asking, what does the person going with them need to do to either help her or him? Like,
Yeah, so that's what I
think
was
about
saying
it in
is,
like how.
yeah, is that she needs someone, those two specific things, that someone has to report back that she is in fact alive.
So
and she
I
needs,
would almost argue you need two characters. You need the chambermaid to be that foil to the cousin that's like, you know, hey, listen to me, like I'm your trusted person, like
yeah,
guy's nuts.
like
And then
he is
maybe they
not
do
okay.
run into somebody, so there's a witness, and you
To-
can decide how scrupulous the cousin is on, like, does the cousin think they killed them and that's how they get away because they didn't actually die?
I actually know how I want to handle that, and it's going to be he gets injured, and so they have to go into town, and he can't kill anybody because he's too sick to kill them.
Then yeah, chambermaid is really good because like he's not going to be thinking about her as like, if he's royal, like she's just a commoner, she's not important.
Yeah,
So like
she
she's talking to the doctors and stuff, and like might not occur to him that like she was.
Yeah. Thinking chambermaid, that could work.
Yep.
Thank
Any other
you.
questions, thoughts,
Good.
things you would like to know about Nano or character or what November is going to look like or any of the things?